Okay, let's take a look at some guidelines for developing accessible Captivate projects. This is by some governmental organization somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where, but this is the official guide for doing this. Okay, we've got our guidelines, introduction, policy, accessibility software, building accessibility into your Captivate videos, software simulations, interactions. Okay. So they're saying here that accessibility should make the content compatible with the person's assistive technology, making sure that all people, including those with disabilities, can participate in and learn from your e-learning course. And we're going to consider some statistics. 8.1 million people have difficulty seeing, 2 million who are blind, and some other statistics. Okay, when building an online course, it is important to start planning your project with accessibility in mind. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to take a finished product and make it accessible. The key is to plan ahead. I agree with that. Accessibility is more than compliance. It is about building a good user experience. You will find that as you develop an accessible presentation, every user's experience will improve, not just individuals with disabilities. I agree with that. One of the tools DFPS frequently uses to build e-learning products is Adobe Captivate 8. Captivate 8 products are commonly rendered as videos, software simulations, interactions, and presentations. Okay. Got some policy. Oh, so this is from the Health and Human Services, HHS, texas.gov. And we've got the accessibility needs and the associated software. Vision loss, no vision. Screen reading software, screen magnification software, and these lists are abbreviated somewhat. Captions for hearing loss, predictive spelling software, and screen reading software for cognitive disabilities. Sure. Physical disabilities, voice recognition software using a keyboard without a mouse, specialized keyboard switch controls, etc. So we're going to build a Captivate training that you can run using your switch controls. That's debatable. It can be challenging to create an accessible Captivate, but it is possible. Start by building an accessible template for all of your Captivate projects. They've developed the documentation process that renders the best results with the least effort. And we're going to follow the steps to build an accessible template and then follow the next steps to create an accessible video. Write your storyboard, record your narration, and choose supplementary audio tracks. Please note that you do not have to include all these elements in your project. You may use 1, 2, or any combination of the 3. Write your storyboard, record your narration, and choose supplementary audio tracks. So you can have recorded narration without a storyboard. Or you can have a storyboard and no narration. I guess we don't have a definition of what they mean by storyboard. We don't have any guidelines for narration, and I would argue that when you're scripting your narration that you should worry about the accessibility of your language and your diction, I believe. Any combination of the three. Okay, so for one thing, I think if I go back up here, that we're talking about Captivate 8. And Captivate 8 is old. We're up to Captivate 2019. Captivate 8 is about when Adobe just kind of abandoned the standalone installations and started moving more towards a subscription-based model for their software. And I just want to see when this document was created. So I'm going to open the properties. And it was Texas Health and Human Services Commission, created in 2016. It's now 2019, so this document is about 3 years behind, 3 years old, so that's fine. So let's go back down and see what we're doing here. I'm just going to kind of run through these instructions just to kind of get it straight in my head. Then I'm going to install the newest Captivate and see if these instructions can still be applied to the newest version of Captivate. And then if they can, I'm going to follow them. And then I'm going to see if they actually work by testing a course against NVDA. So we're going to create a blank project. We're going to enable accessibility in the settings. We're going to turn off autoplay. Great idea. I don't understand why the Adobe and Storyline want these slideshows to play through without any user intervention, because I have never in 10 years designed a course that anybody wanted that to autoplay. And then there's just one step in these tools that you have to do to turn off all the stuff that you don't want. And nobody wants it. At least nobody that I've ever talked to. Select project, type project description in description box. Okay. Okay, I can see the value of having some metadata for your course. Choose video from the Captivate ribbon. Insert video. Find a video and load it up and modify the slide duration to accommodate the video. Okay, those are just settings. Then click OK. Then we edit the video timing, and then we're going to click on closed captioning, and we're going to click the plus sign to add text. So it looks like we're going to use the built-in captioning tools to do this, and we're going to time all the captions manually, which I suppose if you don't have any other tools, that's one way to do it. And without having tried this particular version of Captivate's captioning tools, I don't know how much of a horrible experience it might be. I used it in Captivate 7 and it was pretty tedious and somewhat ineffective. Okay, so we're going to move the yellow cursor to each keyframe, and then we're going to click the plus sign to add the closed captioning that cinches, whatever cinches means, with that particular frame of your video. The cursor number corresponds with the road number. Add closed captioning for the entire video. Okay. Now, after we've added closed captioning for an entire video, and I also don't understand how this is a template, because we've actually grabbed a video and we've actually typed in some captions. So if this were a template that I were going to build, I don't think that I would pre-populate it with any actual content. I think I would just try and get the shell set up and add the content when I am actually building a course. We're going to build our play bar. First, we're going to organize our play bar. We're going to select closed captioning, and then we're going to close the skin editor. Theme default, show playback control, playback colors, position bottom, layout stretched. I'm interested to see how the play bar with the rewind, forward, back, close, mute, fast forward, progress bar, and closed captioning, how that actually works with NVDA. Then click publish. And we're going to choose HTML5 with a flash file fallback from the drop down menu, and we choose where we want the video to live, and we click publish. And we've forced republishing all of our slides. We're not zipping the files, we're not publishing to a folder. If there's any way to never include a flash fallback for a file, I would just get rid of it. I don't think anybody even knows what flash is anymore. This is the scalable HTML content is deselected, and then the seamless tabbing option is deselected for Explorer only. So maybe when I test the end result with NVDA, I will make sure to include IE just to be thorough. Okay, we're going to click on yes to view the video and check the closed captioning, and then see the troubleshooting section of this document if you have any problems. Well, let's just check it now. I'm having problems. Control F is troubleshooting. And there are 2 entries for troubleshooting. And this one says, see the troubleshooting section of this document if you have any problems. And okay, let's go back up to the top. See if we can find troubleshooting in the table of contents. And I don't see a section called troubleshooting in this document. So now I'm in a position where I have to scan through the end of the document. That's where I'm going to look, because maybe that's where it is. Here are some tips. And I'm just not seeing anything. Okay. And we're just back in here. So I don't see any troubleshooting information in this document. So those instructions were not accurate. And I can also see by a lot of the typos and stuff that it doesn't appear as though they got rid of all of the typographical errors in this document. So maybe they just forgot to put in the troubleshooting section. It happens. Nobody's perfect. Okay. So, having said that, let's see where we're at. We're looking at the end of this page here. We're going to do a software simulation. Now, I have used previous versions of Captivate, 6 and 7, to attempt to build a software simulation. And I have also attempted to use software simulation that other developers have built. And I have never been impressed with Captivate's ability to automatically create a software simulation. It's a lot of work, and unless the process that you're attempting to model is very simple, the users just really can't figure out how to use it. And I know that's horrible to say, but having a hotspot on a page among a bunch of other different options, and then having to have the user hold their mouse over this hotspot and click on it doesn't seem to me like that's going to work very well for a screen reader, because how would you generate the distractor targets? And let me put it this way. If you have a screen that has 3 buttons on it that's supposed to be a model of an application that your user is going to be operating, and only one of the buttons is actually a live hotspot, and then the other 2 buttons are fake, where there's no hotspot on top of them, it seems to me like the screen reader would just give the correct answer away, because the only focusable object on the screen is going to be the real hotspot. And again, I'll probably test this out just to be thorough with testing out the advice in this guide, which has been distributed statewide in Texas as as a really good way to build accessible content in Captivate. So we'll just see. So here's how to build a software simulation according to this document. Is you can build it in Captivate. Start by building an accessible template by following these steps. Write your storyboard and your narration if you're using narration. Open a new Captivate and click on New, and then on Software Simulation to open a new project, and then click Create. Select the screen size in the recording area. So you're just going to map out whatever application that you're going to be building your simulation around. And we go from 4 to 5. When you're finished with your software simulation, click the Captivate icon located on your taskbar. Then the simulation opens and you save your project. Then you open the Publish settings and you select Enable Accessibility, Disable Autoplay, type a description in your box, build your play bar in the skin editor just like we did with the video. Customize your play bar, deselect player controls, and closed captionings. If you do not use closed captioning, you need to make sure that the text on the screen and the narration convey the exact same information. Okay, so we've I don't know why, but we've just turned off all of the controls on the play bar. So I don't know why we would have a play bar with no controls, but okay. Determine which callouts you want to appear on the screen. Delete all the extra callouts. Screen reading software does not read highlight boxes or the mouse. Okay. Click on a callout. Open the Properties panel. Open Accessibility. Deselect Auto Label. Leave Accessibility Name and Accessibility Description blank. Click OK. And there's a note here in the Captivate interface that says, if auto label is checked, the accessibility name and description are auto-generated in the Flash publish output. Now, just as an aside here, I did attempt to do all this stuff in Captivate 7, and it was a huge mess because it just simply didn't work for me. The screen reader would not read anything that I entered into the accessibility name or the accessibility description, and it wouldn't read anything if I had auto label suggested. And to me, by having in this dialogue a specific reference to the output being a flash file kind of indicates that, to me, just that Adobe was not very meticulous about the upgrade from Captivate 7 to Captivate 8. And my personal opinion is that they focused on a lot of unnecessary features and neglected to fix some core issues with Captivate 7, especially in the areas of accessibility. Okay, so we're going to click off of the callout. We're going to make sure the slide menu shows that you selected the slide, not the callout. Open accessibility. Enter your narration into the slide accessibility box, or import your slide notes. Click OK. This step is very important. Screen reading software will read the slide notes. So I guess we have the option to just click on the import slide notes. So what if we don't have any slide notes? I don't think that we ever, like in this process, I don't think that we ever created slide notes. So I'm kind of confused right now. We're going to enter a slide name. These are the slide properties. Then repeat steps 1 through 16 for each slide. Insert an audio. Next and back button on each slide. Click on interactions. Choose button from the drop-down menu. Repeat this step twice. You should have 3 buttons on your slide. You cannot copy and paste buttons. You must insert a new button for each interactive object on you slide. If you copy and paste, you will not be able to set tab order. And then you style your buttons. Then you click a name on the button. Then we click on the options in the slide properties menu. Then we can add audio, and we can import or record the audio file. Then we make sure the audio button on your screen is selected. Click on Actions, select Play Audio. On Success, choose the audio file you want to attach to the audio button and click OK. So I guess the idea is you enter the slide and then you're presented with a button that when you click it, it's going to, judging by the shape of the waveform in the example here, it seems like it's going to give the user some spoken instructions or description of something. And my biggest concern with this is competition between the screen reader, JAWS or NVDA or what have you, and whatever your narration is. I suppose it might be okay with shorter clips of narration, but it seems like if you had a very long period of narration on one of these slides, that it might be confusing to hear one set of instructions in one voice, and then like the human reading, and then another set of instructions in the screen reader voice. I'm not sure. Click off the audio button, set the slide properties under Actions to On Enter Pause, and then On Exit No Action. Okay, turning off some triggers. Set a logical tab order. Open the drop-down menu and under Slide Properties, next to the slide name, select Tab Order. And then, I guess, we're going to have audio be first, next slide be second, back slide be third. Okay, that makes sense. So your tab order is consistent from slide to slide. Name the buttons using item accessibility. Click on the button you want to name. Open the drop-down menu next to the name under slide properties. Deselect auto label. Type button name in accessibility name box. Leave the accessibility description blank. Click on OK. Publish the slide to ensure that the tabbing and buttons work. See the troubleshooting section of this document. If you have any problems, repeat these steps for each slide of your simulation. We're talking about potentially 10 or 15 slides for a one-click interaction. I've seen Captivate break these slides out into many, many, many slides. So this seems very tedious if you're going to include narration. And I'm not saying not to include narration. I'm saying that just it seems like you should be aware of how much work it would take to create a software simulation with added audio narration in addition to the accessibility features. Interactions. Building accessible interactions. So we're in a completely different section. Building accessible interactions as Captivate as possible. You'll need to use a few workarounds and will need to test and retest your final project. Determine what type of interaction you will develop. For this demonstration, we will base our instructions upon the development of an interaction with a course menu and a few different types of buttons. Start by creating an accessible template. Open Publish Settings. Select Enable Accessibility. Okay, so these are the same publishing settings that we've done for the other two prototypes, examples. Product description. I'm going to customize the play bar. Or a slide name for each slide. Every slide needs to have a next button, a back button, and an audio button. The Captivate player is not accessible. Oh, you'll have to create these buttons on each slide. For this demo, we will use Captivate default buttons. Insert an audio, next, and back button. Click on Interactions, choose button from the drop-down menu, repeat this step twice. So we've done these buttons before. So this is just going to be kind of a reader where there's some content on the page, there's some narration on the page that is audio that they click on a button to play. And this is pretty much the same process that they loaded in the narration clips in the simulation example before. I click off the audio button. We're going to set the slide properties under Actions to on enter. Okay, so we don't want the audio to play the second we get on the screen, is what's going on here. And then set our tab order so the buttons are in the same order on each slide. That's good. I agree with that. Name the buttons according to the accessibility scheme. We don't want the auto label because it'll be some ridiculous machine name. And then, okay, so those are the steps for creating some navigation buttons that are going to replace the navigation controls on the player bar, which is inaccessible. It doesn't work with JAWS, is what they mean, or NVDA or whatever. And then our course menu, to add some stuff to make the slide look interesting. Add the assets on a master slide to prevent the screen reading software from reading every little, decorative element on the screen. Don't turn them into buttons. We're going to merge the decorative stuff into the background. Okay, because if it sees an image or something like that, the screen reader will just read out whatever it thinks it is. And so you're kind of flattening it back into the background so it doesn't read it. That makes sense. I get out of the master slide, and then we're going to place transparent buttons over each interactive object on the screen. We're putting invisible buttons over the visible buttons for some reason. So we can set the caption for the button We can give it an action of go to next slide. Okay, so the buttons in this example are going to take you to a specific page. So if it's like the start of a chapter or something like that, they can navigate through the chapters in the book. Okay. Same thing about adding these things, and they're naming everything using the accessibility name. And also, they're okay. So I guess there are two places to set the name of the button, and they have to match. One is the accessibility name, and the other is the regular properties name. And I guess if they don't match, then one of them takes precedent over the other, and whoever wrote this didn't like that. I'm going to set a logical tab order. That's great. It's wonderful. Set the tab order. And here we're putting the tab order, okay, we're moving the navigation buttons in between the audio and the next and back. So if someone is using the tab key to find stuff to interact with on the page, the first thing that they're going to hit is the audio narration and then the 3 section buttons. Making e-learning presentations in Captivate is possible. So notice they're making the distinction between a presentation and like an assessment. The biggest thing that makes these e-learning courses valuable for tracking student performance is the assessment. And between Captivate and Storyline, the multiple choice assessments that ship with those products are pretty unreliable in terms of being operable with JAWS or NVDA or VoiceOver or Orca or TalkBack or, you name it. Nobody's figured out how to make a good multiple choice test yet. And it's between Storyline and Captivate. There might be something that I don't know of yet, but I'm talking about these two options. So here are some tips, and we've already seen how to set up the publishing configuration and turning off everything. That's weird. In the first example, everything was checked on here, and then in the subsequent examples of how to set up your accessible template, quote unquote, they made a point of saying to turn them all off because the play bar is inaccessible. So there's that. And then informative names for each slide, because I presume that JAWS is going to read out the name of the slide. Each slide needs to have a next button, a back button, and an audio button. Okay, so we've done this twice already. Import your slide narration to the button. Click on the audio button, click on the options menu, and the slide properties menu, click on options, add audio. So we've done this in 2 other examples so far. So this is the 3rd time they're telling us this. This set logical tab order. This is the 4th time we're presented with this information in this document. Setting the labels, add a text box to the slide, choose text caption from the drop-down menu. Okay, so we haven't seen these steps before when you want to enter text on your slide. We enter the text that we want, the slide properties, we select accessibility, we just deselect the auto label, and then we click off of the text box. Hang on, what did we just do here? I'm lost. Okay, so we're on the text box. Then we open the slide properties, we click on accessibility, we deselect auto label, and accessibility name and accessibility description are unpopulated. Then we click off of the text box. Then we open accessibility in the slide properties panel, and then we enter the text from the text box into the slide accessibility window and then click on OK. Repeat these steps for each text box in your presentation. When you use shapes and images, make sure you use them for aesthetics, not to convey meaning. All information must be written in text and entered in the slide accessibility window. If you use shapes or images in your presentation, follow these steps. The steps are the same whether it's an image or a shape. So we're disregarding the use of an image as part of the content. According to this scheme, all images are to be strictly decorative. So if we choose a shape, put the shape on the slide, and then we turn off auto label. Because I guess when you publish it, auto label is going to look at all of the elements on every slide, and it's going to build an accessibility tree, and it's going to come up with whatever name that it wants and spit that in the accessibility tree, and that's how you end up with the screen reader just spouting a bunch of gobbledygook as the user navigates in the screen. And then the play bar, get it all turned off. I suppose that you can't have a Captivate slide without a play bar. Like, if you have a slide, it's going to have a play bar, and it's not accessible due to Adobe being Adobe. And we have the opportunity to build a table of contents, but we don't want to use it because it will make the presentation inaccessible. Okay, you may eliminate the play bar controls if you provide controls on the screen but don't use both. The fewer controls, the easier it is for all users to navigate the course. I 100% agree with that. Make sure to use a next button and a back button on each slide. 100% agree on that. Add a restart or home button on each slide. If you want to take them back to the table of contents that you created, sure, why not? Add an audio button to each slide to give the learner a choice to use either the screen reader software or the narrator. So I guess that would address the issue with having conflicting information from a human audio file or from the screen reader's voice. And I suppose that that's also why we've been configuring our buttons to not start on slide enter, so you're not force feeding the audio narration to people who don't want or need it. What are we doing here? Button setting. On success, play audio, infinite attempts, slide setting. On enter, pause. On exit, no action. Okay. Images and text boxes. All meaningful information, graphics test, or software simulation must have alternate text. There are many places to add alternate text in a Captivate presentation. Keep in mind that the screen reader will read all alternate text. Avoid duplicating unnecessary occurrences of alternate text. Okay, that's good. Do not import images with text. If you want text on top of an image, create a text box and arrange it on top of the image to prevent the text from pixelating for those who use screen magnifying software. That seems reasonable to me. Screen reading software is used by many people who have vision loss. Run tests with JAWS or whatever. Now, get a copy of JAWS, test your stuff on JAWS, test it on NVDA, test it on everything. Have other people test it on everything. Have other people test it on everything before you're even finished with your course. Do this stuff while your course is in development. If there is something for which you do not want alternate text read, okay. So if you don't want the screen reader to see it, merge it into the background. Okay. Headings must be used in Word documents and LMS pages and other applicable content that supports headings. If it is impossible to use built-in headings, make sure you build your content in a way the screen reading software will read the information in a logical order. Use the alternate text to convey headings, subheadings, and our list. So this is the workaround that they were talking about before. The screen reader user is not going to be able to use the built-in JAWS or NVDA like summary tools, like being able to get a list of links on a page, or being able to get a list of headings on a page, or being able to get information about a paragraph on a page. So the workaround is to kind of give labels of headings and stuff, so that at least when, even though the user is not getting that information in a summary form, that as they go through the presentation, they're at least getting these inline indicators of like, hey, you know, this text that's about to come up is a heading, so it's important. And then giving each slide a title. Enter the alternate text into the slide accessibility box for each slide. So we're not letting the text objects have the alt text. We're putting whatever we want the screen reader to read in the slide accessibility text. Yeah, the slide notes. Okay, got it. Never add text in the slide accessibility and the object accessibility boxes. That's why you get repetitive experience for the user. Okay. Got tab order, adding alternate text to buttons. It has to be a regular button. Short and meaningful button names. The next button should work with enter and spacebar. People using assistive technology will use the enter key to submit. When using Captivate, the enter key is set as default. Do not set shortcut key commands. This can cause the slide to become inaccessible. The spacebar is standard for pressing a button when using assistive technology. If you're going to choose shortcuts that don't comply with like JAWS or NVDA's kind of like conventions, you should tell them about it. Sometimes the buttons get corrupted, so delete them and insert new buttons. Never copy and paste buttons. Check your interactions with your keyboard and not with your mouse. Use standard key controls. Avoid redundancy. Include an accessibility button on each slide and on the LMS homepage that it is linked to a website or document that provides help for people who are using assistive technology. That's a good idea. And then navigation without a mouse. When developing software demos, it is important to illustrate visually or through audio how someone will navigate the software without a mouse. This also allows you to test the software you are training for accessibility and provides the opportunity to give the developers a heads up if the software is not accessible. Because apparently, as an e-learning specialist, your job is to tell Adobe how to build software. Yeah, I have a problem with that concept. I mean, it's not bad advice that they just gave, but, you know, if you're already running short of time, how much time do you have to wage a war with Adobe or articulate? I'd say this from hard-won experience, that that's not the e-learning guy's job. E-learning person guy's job. When you create a software demo, you may branch the course into two parts. Mouse users and keyboards users record the demo once using a mouse, and the second time using a keyboard controls to complete tasks with the software. Give the user a choice of which demo to enter. I got some stuff about videos. Use flashing content. Don't let it play automatically. Use large text, colors high contrast, text-only version of the video, subtitles, descriptive audio, timing. Test your course with your assistive technology. Do it with your monitor turned off. Get JAWS. Try it with Ease of Access Center. For some reason, we just love Microsoft. Use the magnifying tool and test your products. Software simulations are an effective way of teaching your user how to use new applications. When building software simulations, here are a few things to keep in mind. Build one step at a time. Pause each slide of the demonstration by adding a next button. This also allows the user to take time either to listen to the slide, audio, or the screen reader. Allow the user to move backwards so they can review the steps. That's pretty good advice. Select the foreground and background colors. Provide a contrast check. Make sure the images are placed far enough apart so I can zoom in without getting lost in the pictures. Don't convert text to pictures because they can get pixelated. Make sure the text on the screen, alternate text, and narration say the same thing. Offer choices. Learning is more effective when the learner is in control of their learning. I heartily agree with this sentiment. Do not take away player or browser controls or lock people into a course. This creates barriers for assistive technology. This seems to contradict the earlier instructions to turn off all the player controls, but this is a situation where I kind of get what they're saying. I'm not going to take it at a literal value. Do not lock browsers or dimensions of the player screens. You may offer two versions, one accessible and one not, in one course. Use branching to allow the user to choose one path or the other. Only do this if you have exhausted all other options. Why? Because then you have to develop the course twice is why. It's one time for everybody is the best. And then use plain language and eliminate unnecessary narration. For example, instead of describing where a link is located on the screen, just add a call out and tell them to click the link. And that's the final word in this document. I'm interested to see if following their instructions will render something that is nice and usable, but we're still missing the multiple choice quiz, which is kind of the hallmark of these e-learning projects. So I will see you in the next video where we actually go through the steps of building one of these products according to the guidelines in this document.